All right, we are live for another episode of Performance That Matters. Very special guest today. I'm joined by Mr. Mark Bouris.
How you going, mate?
MB, great to be here. Great to chat. I've been looking forward to this for quite a long time. MB, you've got a really cool project going on. You've always got heaps of things going on. I feel like everywhere I look on social media, you're kind of the unofficial Prime Minister of Australia. But then you decided to take on another role. You've got Project 100. Tell us about it. What is it and why are you even doing that?
Well, why I've been doing it, why I first started as opposed to why I'm still doing it, is that my father used to see me every Saturday morning. My father passed away last year, but he used to see me every Saturday morning, and then one of my sons would come in with one of their sons. So we'd have 4 generations of Bourises, and unfortunately in our family they're all boys. In my family, it's all men. I have a sister, but I'm talking about in my immediate family, my people who I've produced, let's call it. And I thought, well, how good's that? And I did a calculation that for me to be able to emulate that, what my dad's is doing, I'd have to live to at least 100. So I thought, okay, I need to live to 100 years of age. I'm 70 years of age next year. And I thought, wow, I need to maybe start to think about this stuff and how can I best explore how I can live to 100. It doesn't mean I will live to 100, anything can happen, but how do I best explore that? And as typical, what I normally do is I turn it into a project and then I turn it into a business. And now that business occupies quite a bit of my time and effort. And as it's become a business, I then become pretty intense about how it operates in terms of guests, in terms of output, in terms of audience, and in terms of other potential commercial outcomes that might sort of come around it. So yeah, it's started off as a thought, it's become a strategy, and now it's about execution.
I wasn't joking earlier when we had another episode that we discussed that. I do use you as a reference for a lot of our older masters athletes. And like you just said, you're coming on 70 years old. Yeah, I probably shouldn't hand out your info, but I go, look at this. This is what's possible. If you look after yourself, you train, you eat properly, you can do it. Because a lot of people, I think, as they get a bit older, they just go, oh, you know what? It's too hard. It's too hard and I don't want to do it. But like you said, you're coming on 7 decades and you've done a lot in your life. What I want to understand is, have you always been this health conscious? Has that been something from since you were a young fella that was instilled with you when you were younger? How's that changed over 70 years of life?
Well, it was. My mother, who's my mother, late mother, who was a very intelligent, well-read woman, used to always be banging on, and when I was a kid, like talking 60 odd years ago, my mother used to be banging on about taking vitamin E tablets, vitamin C tablets, a certain amount of calcium per day, like in terms of milk in those days. Way ahead of people who were eating white bread. She was getting what they call Vogel's bread, which was a style of bread that was brand new in those days. Certain amount of fruit, eat yogurt every day. My mother was quite intense in relation to health and sport, exercise and health. Food, in terms of food. And it was nowhere near as sophisticated as, what you would do today and what food is known about today, what is known about food today. And my dad is Greek, and of course the whole Greek diet was a big deal for us. That was most of the type of food we ate. And let's call it the proper Mediterranean diet. So I have had that, I've experienced it and lived with that my whole life. My family are also very sport-minded. My mother and father are very sport-minded, my brother and sister as well. So I just grew up doing sport, and I was lucky I was pretty good at it. So I've always participated in sport, and I've had my mates have been evolved around sport. So anyone I was mates with, for some reason, ended up being a sports person, and therefore I used to just train up and keep training up. I've always been interested in being the best version of myself, and no matter what I do, Geordie, like in terms of work, it doesn't matter. Maybe not that good at in terms of personal relationships. I've slipped up a few times there. But in terms of work, I have a work ethic which is about being the best version of myself. I get quite obsessed about stuff. That's probably my personality. So sport, exercise, nutrition, sleep is something I've only become more aware of as being important. only because of the stuff I read and watch these days. But definitely in terms of work, etc., everything I do is done obsessively and intensely, because I like to do the best job I possibly can. So it doesn't matter what it is, what regime it is. But now, because of Project 100 and because of my age, I've realised, when you think about it, Geordie, like, I put a post up the other day. If I lift the average age of an Australian male, 81 years of age, 81.6 years of age, came back, the average age of an Australian this year, in 2024 I should say, came back 0.2 of a year, which is a bit of a worry actually. But if I lifted the average age of an Australian male, I've only got like last year I said I got 12 more Christmases left, 12 more UFCs in Sydney, 12 more State of Origin games, 12 more birthdays from my kids, 12 more birthdays from my that's not very fucking much. Like, it's not a lot. All of a sudden I've understood the importance of this project. Actually very important, this project, to me personally. It's very selfish, but the way I justify my selfishness on my journey is that I'm going to share it with as many people as possible. So not many people can get, you're on my show and other people being on my show, and there'll be lots more well-known scientists and practitioners on my show about living longer and better. I'm lucky, I know these people. Most people don't have access to someone like you. So what I'm doing is I'm distributing that access to you. So that's how I justify my selfishness. I will explore this about myself, and then I'll share it with everybody. And it's not going to cost you any money. It's for free. So, yeah.
Is there a point in your life where you thought you were the best version of yourself?
I think I was probably the best version of myself. Well, it depends. If you mean overall, intellectually, financially, and physically, so optimizing each one of those, yes. That would have been probably around 48 years of age. 49. So every component of myself was optimized. But in a physical sense, definitely my 30s and early 40s. But now it's different. I think I would say round about now I'm going pretty good too, because I have a certain, this sounds a bit self-congratulatory, but a little bit more wise. So depends where you put the weight. If you want to weight in any statistical analysis, one element compared to another. So in my 30s, I would have weighted my physicality. In my late 40s, early 50s, I was more weighting my wealth relative to what it had been. Today, I would put much more weight on my wisdom, or what I know, what I've learned about myself, not about the world, not about the worlds I work in, but what I've learned about myself. And I put a lot of weight on that now, and I think I'm in a pretty good spot right now. I'm pretty happy.
What year, 48, 49, what years are we talking there?
50, when I was 50, it was about 20, 20 years ago, so 2004.
So this is the period where Wizard?
Yeah, it's when I sold business and I got a whole bunch of money, a lot of money. And, it's in a financial sense, it was, I would say at that point, I felt on top of the world, because it was not just the amount of money I got, is what the amount of money represented in the sale. So it represented a couple of things to me, that I was able to take a business from a startup, turn it into a very, very big business here in Australia and New Zealand, and sell it to the world's largest company. And so that was a sort of a big accolade for a kid come from the west suburbs of Sydney who had stuff all of anything. I grew up pretty, I wouldn't say poor, but we were a working-class family. We didn't have plenty of money, and, we got by, don't get me wrong. But, I just saw that as a big achievement for myself.
That was through the period of 1996, 2004, when you sold Wizard, which is what we're saying is probably one of your peak versions of yourself there. How much weight were you putting on health during that period?
Well, probably not enough, because what happens in those environments, you tend to think you're bulletproof physically and maybe mentally, and you then can be a bit extreme. So when money didn't matter, and all of a sudden money didn't matter, and didn't give a shit what I spent it on, and we're talking about a period when, and living in Sydney, you could get up to mischief, and I was getting up to mischief, and probably burning the candle at both ends. I don't need to get into details, but I was always a willing person, sort of pretty much not really, I wouldn't say fearless, but I get to a point where I could be reckless. Recklessness and fearlessness, there's sort of an association between the two. By the way, no one should ever mistake recklessness for fearlessness, but there is an association between the two. You think you're fearless, but you're actually reckless. I was a bit reckless physically in relation to what I was doing. So I put a bit of weight on, it didn't bother me too much, knocking around with some good blokes, but I was never going anywhere with that sort of stuff. As I said, I felt bulletproof, and that's not really a good thing to feel. Bulletproof, for me, I need to be challenged all the time. I have now learnt about myself that I need to be completely challenging myself all the time. I need to be learning a language. I need to be doing sports that I don't feel like doing tomorrow morning. Like this morning, I went and did Jiu-Jitsu. I did not feel like doing it. I've been doing it all week. I felt, you know what it's like. I felt a bit broken physically, and I had to get there early. But I've realised that challenge is really important to me. Go do it. It's a bit like jumping in an ice bath. I don't even like ice baths. And I don't even have to leave the work, but it's like it's doing something I don't want to do. So, but back then, when I was 50, I wouldn't do that. I'd go to the pub and I'd drink till 11 o'clock at night, and I would wake up the next morning and throw down whatever I feel like eating. I wasn't thinking of anything else other than just enjoying the moment.
Why do you think that's a common trend amongst business people?
Well, I think business people who come from nowhere, it's a common trend. You and I talked about it in a podcast you did with me on Project 100. It's a bit like the mentality where you're training for a fight and you're on a 10-week program and you've got to drop 10 kilos and you train your ass off 2 or 3 times a day. You get to the point where you make weight, you have the fight, and what you do the next day is you completely forget everything you've just done for the last 10 weeks, and you go, that night after the fight you have a beer, and you feel like you're going to faint. The next morning you wake up with a few aches and pains, and you eat chocolate and you eat shit, and you don't train for the next month, and you put on that 10 kilos plus another 5 kilos. It's about what I didn't have, I'm going to fucking have it. And for someone like me, and a lot of people have the same story, we never had it. I toughed it out during the whole period. I was a wizard. I sold my house. I put my family in a position where it was all or nothing. I could have lost the whole thing. The wizard thing may not have worked out. I could have lost everything. But I put it all in the last race. And no matter what happened, I was going to make it work. But I certainly didn't live in a luxurious life. I mean, I led a pretty meager life. The moment I busted through, just like that was my last fight, I ripped in. And there was no consequences for me. No, I could do whatever I want. I wasn't answering anybody, and so I don't know if it, was all that great an outcome for me. It was good that it told me that I can do something and take it to the final, the last degree. Sell to the world's largest company in one of the most competitive mortgage markets in the world, Australia. And do really well out of it. It was a pretty big price, especially for those days, 20 years ago. And I don't know if that's ego or self-satisfaction. I don't know what it is. It's a bit like admiring your punches, though. You see fighters, they throw a real good punch and get hooked on someone, but they stand back and admire the punch and they get whacked twice. It's a bit like that, I think. When I think back about it, I often think back about that period. I think the most important thing I got out of that, Jordy, is I think back, what did I do well during that period? What worked for me during that period? And how should I employ that today? I often think about what were the things I did that were right. Plenty of things I did wrong, but what were the things I did right? And that's probably the greatest thing I got out of all that.
What were they?
Well, I would ridiculous hours. I worked in any business, you've got to work ridiculous hours. I talk about this all the time. I measure everything. I would fall asleep on the floor at the office. I would not fall asleep. I would go to sleep on the floor at the office, not go home. A lot of people today talk about these things. I don't really talk about it very much, but I actually did, sacrifice a lot of things, or probably more important, interactions with a lot of people. Some of which were responsibilities of mine, like kids, mother, father, brother, sister. It was a big deal. I did a lot of sacrifices for my kids, but it wasn't a conscious sacrifice, Jordy. It was I just knew what I had to do, and I just took the view, that's what I'm doing. I'm not going to think about anything else. I didn't sit back and say I'm actually consciously sacrificing my kids. I didn't know I was doing it. I was sort of, maybe it's avoidance behaviour, avoiding what I sort of probably unconsciously knew I was doing it, but it wasn't a conscious thing. I just knew what I had to do to get the outcome. And my partner was Kerry Packer. There was no excuse for Kerry. It's like having a coach who just says, there's no other way you can operate. You give me the outcome that I've invested in. It's like if you've got a tough coach and you're getting ready for a fight or the Olympics or whatever it is, and I was well aware of the mission. The mission was to take on the biggest banks by market capitalisation in the world. Australian banks are the most profitable banks in the world in terms of market capitalisation. The size of the amount of capital they employ relative to the amount of profit they make is ridiculous. The Australian banks control the market. So me and John Simons at Aussie, we were taking on this. It was a big mission, and my partner was a big name, and he invested a lot of money, and he was sort of like my coach, if you want to say. And I didn't want to let him down, and I would do anything not to let him down. And it wasn't about me; it was about him, about my staff. I just so that stuff drove me. And unfortunately, some of my kids missed out on some of the things. I always try to get their sport, but a lot of times I didn't get to see them. I missed a lot of important events in their lives, graduations, all those sorts of things, school results, etc. So, but they're the sacrifices ultimately most successful people in those days had to make. Today, people are different. The entrepreneurs are different today. I just think that entrepreneurs are much more aware of stuff. People like me and Kerry and I think we suffered from a lack of awareness. It's a bit weird, but we're all reasonably intelligent people, but we suffered from a lack of awareness. Today, new entrepreneurs, they're much more aware. They know they've got to spend time with their families, assuming they've got a family. If they don't have a family, it doesn't matter. They're happy to lock themselves into their building and work upstairs and live downstairs, Those days, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you take it on everybody, institutions, then it was all or nothing.
Is it possible these days to do it in a way where you have the balance, and do you have to have that all or nothing mindset?
No, I think today you can, and I see lots of young guys who are doing it, and young women who are doing it, and it's about an awareness, and it's also about an understanding between you and the people that you are interacting with. Let's call it your family. It doesn't mean your brothers, sisters, kids, or what. Just who is your family? Who's your family group? Who's close to you? It's about having conversations, talking about it. Now, I'm not talking about life-work balance. I think it's all bullshit. Like you're always backfilling in your business. You won't attend to something because you got a whole lot of work on. You don't control the world. You have to just do the work when it's there available to you. If you were to go to if there's a UFC event on, you can't say, oh, look, I want to go and it's in Las Vegas. I got to get my life-work balance right. Forget it. You've got to be there, okay? When you come back, you can backfill. Well, the difference is today for me and for others, I think, to answer your question, it's the awareness that I've got to backfill. For me, I never backfilled. I just kept going. And to some extent, I wondered to myself, well, what was I thinking? Like, I just wasn't aware that for me, I just thought you get married, have kids, dropped out, 4 kids, wife will look after them. She's right, she'll be right, and I'll work, I'll be right, I'll bring the money home. Like, I just thought all that stuff would work. Maybe because that's how my parents grew up, I don't know. That's what I observed in my own family. But people have needs. Wives have needs, kids have needs. They probably see other people getting a bit more attention. But these days I'm much more aware of that stuff. I think I'm a better person. I was also, as I said earlier, I was reckless too. So when you're drinking and all that other stuff, you tend not to make very good decisions.
You look back on that period knowing what you know now and say everything you do know. Would you say you were healthy during that period?
Physically?
Physically, mentally?
Probably not mentally. I thought I was healthy, but probably not. I was erratic. I was a bit too ruthless in business. What I mean by that is I didn't give a fuck what anyone did or thought. That's what I want to do, and I'm doing it. I thought it was the right thing to do. I didn't do bad things to people, but I probably delivered it in not a very good way. So my delivery was probably not good. I just knew this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it this way. Physically, I didn't know any better other than, I just knew my crowd. There weren't people around like you. There weren't people around like Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman. They're not. People weren't talking about this sort of stuff that we talk about today. Nutrition, I knew instinctively about nutrition from my growing up, but I didn't know about booze. In those days, they used to say, like, it's healthy to have 2 glasses of wine a night. So I would say, okay, I'm not going to drink 2 glasses of wine a night, but I'll drink 12 on Saturday. My kids remind me of periods when I would bring a case of beer home on a Saturday, say Friday night, and Saturday morning I'd get the mower out and I'd do the gardens. It'd take me all day, but I'd drink the whole case of beers, those little twist tops. I'd drink the whole case. I wasn't drunk. They weren't saying, "Oh, Dad, you're drunk and falling over." I didn't get that drunk, but I was be sweating, and that was just a day's work for me. I remember, when I used to work in the restaurant with my uncle. My uncle used to have, he was a chef. He used to have jugs of beer, and he'd drink over the night. He'd drink a couple of jugs of beer. It's a thing, you know what I mean? Like, so I wasn't aware that was unhealthy. Someone would say, "Do you drink?" "Oh, I don't drink Monday to Friday, but I'll drink on Saturday night." And I wouldn't necessarily go always to the pub, but I would drink. And I would drink whatever I get my hands on. And I'm so lucky that I didn't get – I remember hurt badly. I remember one time one of my sons was getting christened. It was his baptism. And he's getting baptised around the corner from where we're living. And my brother came over and he said we arranged to cook a lamb on the spit because there's all these people coming, like family people. And I was also renovating my house. And so we started the spit at 6 a.m. You got to start early. So we got the red wine out, started to drink a red wine at 6 a.m. in the morning. And at about, I had a couple of mates coming down, flying down from Queensland. Queensland, Gold Coast. And he was arriving at 3 in the afternoon. And I remember at about 12 o'clock, I'd been drinking so much red wine, I was pretty happy. I said to my brother, "Let's climb up on the roof and I'll show you the view that we're going to have when we do the next level. We're going to build another level." And I fell through the roof. Straight through the roof. And cut my leg open and all that sort of shit. And of course, it didn't go to the doctor or anything like that. In those days, you didn't. So I went, and then I passed out, and I didn't get to see my mate who flew down from the Gold Coast. So little stupid, little reckless things like that. But I was lucky nothing happened to me. I could have fallen off the roof onto the ground and broke my neck or something. Like I just banged my leg up a little bit. But, those things... Today, we just know that stuff doesn't work. You can't live your life like that. I don't even drink now. I might have one glass a week by choice. And I'm suffering from it either, but I'm quite happy about it. I couldn't care less. But back in those days, it was lack of awareness of the effect that these things might have on you. And also, I didn't give a fuck.
You're probably one of the healthiest 70-year-olds getting about. Imagine if 48-year-old you came here, sat here, and said, hey, MB, give me some advice. Knowing what you know now, doing the Project 100, having that extra experience, what would you tell him to do?
The first thing I would say is the three things. Get your sleep right. And sleep is, to me, is like a vitamin pill. And the more I've learnt about it, in terms of the physiological recovery and the mental recovery, the brain cell recovery, and making sure when I say sleep, I'm talking about understanding how much REM sleep you have, how much deep sleep you have, and how many hours of sleep you have, and what the consistency of sleep is, and all those things that are going to affect those things, like alcohol. Then that's the first thing I would say to you if you were me sitting here opposite. That's the first thing. Second thing I would say to you is, if you're going to exercise, do an exercise that's going to be good for you functionally at some stage in your life when you're going to be looking to fall back on something you've done. So when you're 80, what do you want to be able to do? Build an exercise regime around that. And it might mean if I'm 80, I want to be able to pick up my grandson who's 20 kilos and put him up on that table. Then what muscles do you need to activate to do that? And what exercises do you need to do that activation? And how often do you need to do it? And how often, like once or twice a week, and get someone who's an expert in that particular area. And so in other words, build your exercise regime around functionality. So my current exercise regime is I do resistance work. I do zone 2, and I try to do once a week VO2 max. Sometimes the VO2 max doesn't happen, but zone 2 I'll do 130, 140 minutes a week. But I also love Jiu-Jitsu. And there's a reason why I like Jiu-Jitsu. It's not because I want to become a skilled at the craft. I do, but that's just the competitive me. The real reason I do Jiu-Jitsu is for brain health, cognitive. So, and it's also doing something that I don't want to do. And the reason I don't want to do it, Jordy, is because I'm not used to walking in the gym as being the worst person in the gym. One, the oldest, and two, the least skilled. You walk into a Jiu-Jitsu gym or an MMA gym at my age, and I've never done Jiu-Jitsu until I've been started a couple of years ago, but I've only been doing it for a few years. That is a big deal for someone like me, because boxing ring, I'm happy to walk in anywhere and I can spar with anyone because, you have ring craft, to get out of the way. You can make it as hard or as easy as you want, depending on who the person is you're sparring with. But Jiu-Jitsu is different, as you know. You can get fucked up pretty easy and very uncomfortable. And you'll get injuries. And you'll definitely get injuries if you've been drinking the night before and you didn't have enough sleep. And you're not looking after yourself. So my regime is about doing, and I would say to myself, Mark, it's like a language to me, Jiu-Jitsu. Do things that are good for your brain. You can learn a language, like, I do and you do, I know that. You can go and learn music, which I did music at school as a subject, and I still played the piano. But Jiu-Jitsu is like a language. It's a bit like learning how to code, anything that's sort of really challenging, do that. And I would say that to myself at 48. Mark, you should have done that then. Boxing, I've been doing it all my life, so it's like instinct to me now. Like, if I know how to get inside someone and, there's no learning in there for me. So I'd say do exercise regimes that make you learn. Do exercise regimes that help the function that you want to be able to complete when you're in your 80s. Sleep really well. Have a strategy around sleep. So the time of night you go to sleep, the consistency in which you sleep, the temperature, understand the temperature in which you sleep best. Monitor it, manage it, measure it like I do. And the final one is your food. And, booze is out for me because I've now learned no amount of booze is any good for you. I do like to have a drink, but Yeah, it's one of those things I just give up. I've given up. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. My mate say, have a drink. I don't give a fuck. No, I don't want to drink. I'll drink a half a beer, or I'll sit on a beer, or I'll get a glass of wine and go to an event. I'll have a glass of wine in my hand, but I won't drink it, or I'll drink maybe 2 mouthfuls. Food, I'm like crazy about food now, and that obsession around food probably started about 6 or 7 years ago when you helped me out lose some weight to make some masters events, and I became really conscious of calories and food. You got me on DEXAs and measurement and metabolic rate testing at rest, and then once you put that idea into my head, I couldn't get rid of it, and I'm not fighting now, but I still do DEXAs. I'll do 2 DEXAs a year. I still go and do a metabolic rate test to see where my metabolism is at rest relative to, I compare it to what it was 8 years ago. Still. And I know, and my metabolism is actually, I'm burning more calories today than I was before. And then I get really obsessed about the amount of calories I eat. And I don't mean in a weird way. I sort of know what I should and shouldn't eat. I've been doing it for long enough now. I sort of know, and I try to eat good quality food. I try to eat unprocessed food. I try to eat organic food where I can. It's not always easy when you travel. Hydration, they're just things that, a lot of these things you got into my head, and once something gets in my head, I can't get it out. So you're to blame for my obsessive behaviour. But it works. It's good obsession. That there are good obsessions to have. You know what I mean? And I don't, be different. I was out trying to wash my hands. A funny story, like when I had David Hasselhoff on the Celebrity Apprentice one year, he gave me a little card after I'd sort of fired him, and he gave me this card, and it was like a credit card, and it was black, and it had, and I said, what is that? And he said, squeeze that in there, and you squeeze it, and actually hand sanitizer came out, not sanitizer, but like the stuff that we were using during COVID. And I said, why is that? He said, because he said, every time you shake someone's hand, you get germs on your hand. He's a germaphobe, actual germaphobe. And by the way, so is the President of the United States is a germaphobe as well. And I do not obsess like that. I try to obsess about things that are valuable to me or good for me. Like I obsess about my grandkids. I made a conscious decision to obsess about things that are good for me. Reading, learning, food, exercise, sleep, and work.
Where can someone start if they're a business owner? Because when you start a business, you put everyone else first but yourself, and you just got to go. And you got, like you said, you got a lot of people, even if it's not at the level of, say, Wizard was at, going all in, a lot of people do it. They put their house on the line, they put their family's time on the line. Where do they even start? Because like it sounds like it's important, right? Like it's important if you're a business owner and you want to operate at your best, you got to be taking this stuff seriously. But where do they even start with it?
I think start with yourself. So don't go into business if you're not the best version of yourself, physically, mentally, because it'll kill you in the end. It'll crush you. So be the best version of yourself. That's the first thing. And that takes like a bit of commitment. So if you say, I've got to, that's the first thing. Second thing is, what's your idea? So it doesn't matter if someone else is doing it. Everyone goes, oh, there's 25 other people doing it. These people got $5 million and they're allocated $5 million to it. No, forget about all that. I mean, there are other people doing what I was doing. I was taking on the banks, have been there for 100 years. So like if my attitude was someone else doing it, well, there's no, Mark, get out of it, don't do it. So have your idea. Don't worry if someone else is doing it. What you got to do is, how am I going to do it better? Or what is it that I can do that is appealing? I don't need the whole market. I just need a percentage of the total market. Enough, and be clear on that. So you need, and people talk about the total addressable market, which I think is just nonsense. But understand the market that you can tap into and what level of money, what percentage of that market do you need? But the idea, that's the idea. Then it comes down to execution. And execution is about all in. And you might say, oh, I'll do it for the next 3 years. That means you're going to compromise a lot of other stuff. Sit down and talk to your wife, your family, whatever your family is. Make sure everyone understands. And by the way, before you start, does everyone understand? Do you want to be part of the journey? Are we in this together? Now, if you feel really strongly about it and they don't want to be part of it, well, you got a choice. Then don't wait till after you create it and it's worth a whole lot of money and then your family says, we want to divorce you and they're going to get half of it or 60% of it. You're better off doing it early days before it's not worth anything. And I'm being ruthless about this because you're the one that's going to be making all the sacrifices. It's going to be your loss because they will miss out on seeing you, but you will get not punished, but you'll be the one who loses something because of it. They will, but you will too. So make sure if you're going to have that, if that conflict is the potential, sort it out early. At least know what your position is and you know, well, the reason I've decided to do this and they're all going to go their own direction is because I think this is more important than them. But don't come back and say, oh, I'm really shocked. It's really unfair. I've worked really hard, made all this money, then they come and took it. That's a bullshit excuse. Make the call early days. And that's all part of the execution process. And once you make the call, you know exactly what you're up for. You're not feeling guilty. You need to revisit it every 12 months just to see where you're at and talk to everybody about it. Talk to your kids, talk to your mum and dad, talk to your wife, your husband, talk to your other half, talk to your brothers and sisters, and just get a sense of it. I think they're probably the most important things. I mean, there's different industries. I wouldn't have a clue what all the various industries are, but once you make that call, go for it. Day one, go for it. And don't go for it in a way that I want to get this done in next 12 months, 18 months. You got to be patient. My podcast business, I've been doing it for 10 years. We've done nearly 800 podcasts. Only this year and last year did we start to become quite successful. People go, oh, wow, you got such a big audience, really popular and getting all the great guests. That's because I was one of the first to do it in Australia. I've been doing it for a long time, and I'm a patient bastard. Yellow Brick Road, I started up in 2009, and here we are, 2025, and I'm still running it. I'm still running that business. And I would love it to have been as successful as quickly as Wizard was, but Wizard, there was a lot of sliding door moments, like some luck, global luck, like things that I had no influence over. Things that just happened perfectly in terms of timing for me. You got to be prepared to be in it for the long haul. So have an idea. Don't expect your idea to be so unique that no one else thought of, because I can tell you now, Jordy, everyone's thought of everything. There is nothing different. It's maybe the delivery can be different. Maybe your attitude can be different. Maybe you're going to take on a big organization and if you're going to do that, you're hoping they might buy you out because you make enough noise, enough nuisance of yourself. And something I always say to everybody, make sure you know what your exit's going to be. Are you going to sell? Are you going to list it? Are you just going to bring partners in? What is your exit and who to? Who is your potential buyer? Who could they be? You don't have to have it right, but have it in your mind that you are always building for an exit. You may never exit. You may be there to the day you die. Warren Buffett. But don't worry, he would always be thinking to himself, if I need to get out, this is my exit. This is who's going to buy me and this is how much they're going to pay. And he's building the business for that outcome, even though he may never execute on that outcome. He's building the business for that outcome. Too many people never think, they get bogged down on the day-to-day stuff. And they're never thinking about the day-to-day stuff doesn't necessarily build value. Value is the strategic stuff you do when you step back and you work on the business as opposed to working in the business. Too many people I know are just, I'll give you a good example. I had Ray Hadley on my podcast when he retired, and Ray was talking about his dad. His dad was a butcher, and Ray's dad, and Ray got quite emotional about this, but Ray's dad would prefer to work in the business than own a business. In other words, work on the business. And I often wonder about that. I think to myself, there are a lot of people like that, which is fine. There's no problem with it. But sometimes people do that because they're trying to avoid the hard questions, like How long are we going to be at this for? What are the, how much am I going to be able to pay myself every week? Or do I have to pay everyone else first? Usually you're the last to get paid. Do I have to borrow some money to run the bank account? Do I have to go and talk to people on the supply side or on the demand side? I'm not really good at that sort of stuff. And I know it's funny, Ray observed that about his father, and that actually made Ray quite emotional, that he felt as though his dad could have done better, and he didn't feel disappointed in his dad. He felt bad for his dad, that his dad never took this opportunity to own his own butcher shop instead of being a butcher in a butcher shop. And I think that business owners have to make sure they know that they own the business, they are working on the business, and stop. And every now and then, don't have an avoidance behavior where you're not thinking about, where you're just going to work every day. Get up, 6, get dressed, go to work, get home, have your dinner, go to bed, get up the next one. You've got to stop. Say, wait, what's going on here? How am I adding value to this joint? Why is this butcher shop going to be better than the one down the road? What is it about my position in this street? Can I improve my wrapping paper, or what? How can I increase my value? How can I get more customers? How can I get more dollars per customer? How can I get customers coming more often? How can I get customers to refer to somebody else instead of just wake up in the morning, oh shit, all the meat's arrived, I better go and cut it all up and get it into the steaks, and you got to take a step back on these things. And I think to me, that's one of the most important things for people to be successful today. Young entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, that's one of the most important things they've got to do. Be prepared for that.
So if we're going to summarize Mark Bouris's formula, sleep. Get a lot of good quality sleep. Do what you have to do to get the sleep. Exercise. Do things you enjoy, but do things that are going to be useful for you.
Always useful stuff.
Always useful. Nutrition. Take it seriously. Take it seriously. Put good food in your body. Get a good output. And if you're going to commit and effing go for it.
Totally, mate. You should. There's no half measures. And there's always going to be a person around the corner who's going to cut your lunch. So you got to put them in a position where they can't. Or at least put yourself in a position, you're giving yourself a fighting chance. That's really important. And learn as much as you can. Be curious and learn as much as you can. Just keep learning about your subject matter. Never, ever stop learning about your subject matter. The day you think you know everything about your subject matter, that's the day you should leave that business.
I think that's a great place to finish it up. Mark, thanks so much for coming on. I'm sure all business owners, people who are just working, anyone will get a lot out of that. But MB, I know you're busy, so thanks for taking the time.
Good to see you, Geordie.